thanks for everyone for joining, and yeah, kind of like what Erin said, that this is kind of like a new, like we've been trying to experiment a little bit, like what kind of things could be interesting, and like we're super grateful for everyone in this community and like helping with the launch, and also just like helping us giving the feedback. So we've been kind of like thinking like how can we give it back or like help you all, and we know you're like busy building your own things, so we want to like always think about something useful. So we got some questions about like the recent launch and like the website and like what was our thinking behind it. So that's why we thought to share more about it. And then, but most of the time on this call, we want to kind of open it up and be interactive. So I won't take much time, but then there's opportunity to ask questions. And Erin, if you can stop the screen share. All right, so yeah, so I will focus on the website, but just kind of like give you like an overview on the design that me and kind of like Adrian work on. So we do have this kind of like a design system built in, like from basically from the beginning for Linear, and I think that's something I often recommend to people to do, even if you're like early stage startups. And like you don't need to be like, you don't have to make it very complex or very impressive. So sometimes it just helps to like collect a few colors that you use all the time, and then like build them in Figma on the side panel, like so you can actually use them in the designs. The other thing I use a lot is the kind of like type setting. So you have like certain type sizes, and you kind of like try to use the consistent sizing. So it's kind of like speeds up the design, but also like makes the app more consistent. We also have things like elevation and like shadows built in. So, and the shadows are different in light and dark, because like, yeah, like the contrast on a dark mode, you need to have like stronger shadows. And yeah, we do have some components and icons and things, but we haven't done actually that much work on the component side. That we do have the components in the code, but they're not necessarily like building into the Figma. Jumping to the website, so kind of like the starting idea with this website was just like, we do have the change log, but it is sometimes hard to follow. I think like you have to follow it weekly to see what's happening. And I think sometimes it's hard to see like this overview of like, okay, what has happened, like how has things changed. So kind of like the idea came together that like, could we do this kind of like more like we have a change log that we keep doing new things all the time, but then could we have more like a release that collects some of the major changes together? And like the inspiration here was like, obviously like Apple, they do like, they do this like annual or like mainly annual releases on the software, and usually they have like some kind of collection of features. And I think like I and a lot of people have liked these kind of things that like where you just kind of like summarize everything very simply into these kind of cards, which you get like a quick overview of what has happened. Like for example, like this is like just car keys, and there's the wallet icon, so you kind of like understand that, oh, you can now have car keys in the wallet. So it's like quite effective. It's not maybe always that clear, but anyway, it's like it is kind of like a good summary in one picture. So I kind of like started to design, like usually what I do is I have this like some kind of idea, like some kind of starting point for it, like, okay, this is something we want this kind of summary. And the one reason we did this like a specific release instead of like kind of like just changing the homepage is that like feel like the homepage needs to be somewhat like, it's kind of like evergreen content. It's also like, that's kind of like the landing page where most people come in and they might not have any context. So you kind of have to like keep it fairly simple and fairly high level. And you kind of have to like keep it almost like also kind of like talk about the main things all the time. So the release page kind of like gives us the opportunity to talk about different things, and it's going to be more like specific because it is not the landing page. So I first started with this kind of more of kind of like warm toned, like kind of a little bit like I tried to feel like a little bit more like retro looking style. And like you can see some of here, like I try to do this like a gradient box, which I also felt like it was more like something like retro looking. So like all the text is a little bit like pinkish, and it's like kind of like feels kind of, I don't know, I was thinking like kind of like the Blade Runner, or like I don't know, you're on Mars and every text is like very kind of red toned. So, and we tried like a little bit different tonings, and like, okay, could it be more orange or whatever? But what I started to feel like, often I try to like push the direction a little bit to kind of like to make it a little bit over, like, and then like feel like how it feels. And then like what I started feeling with this is like it's too much. It's like too separate from our kind of current design, so it doesn't like quite like fit. So I started like bringing it back. So like I started like bringing the tones a little bit more towards like this kind of cold tones, or like made this gradient that kind of like brings over the cold and the warm. So there's some kind of connection there. I started like removing that. It started doing more like white text or like gray text. So the text is more kind of like it's not stylized as much. That's also something I often think about in design, is that like I think like the content is more important than the kind of ornaments. So like text or images, like I want people to focus on the images and the text, and not on the how they're styled. So kind of like the primary purpose of this page is that people see the features and not the page itself. Obviously the page needs to like feel good and like it needs to look good, but it's more about the content. And yeah, tried a little bit more like different tones, and like going more like, I don't know, colder tones, and like try different gradients, try different kinds of boxes. Often when I start designing, I just kind of like, sometimes I just write the text in there, the copy. Sometimes I just like copy something somewhere to like just like place it in there to like see how it would fit, or like how would we lay out the text. And I tried with different kinds of like kind of arrangements. So like these are more like rows, and this is more like kind of like a, I don't know, like a square with like 3 boxes. And then we wanted to kind of like make this like main features more like bigger, so they stand out more, that you understand they're like the main features, and these are like kind of like little things. So it's kind of like the size also like kind of communicates the importance. And we also had this kind of like some inspiration, like this kind of like, I don't know, space planets gradient things that we found somewhere, and we're kind of like using that as inspiration to like, what if we created shadow, like gradients out of these type of images, or these kind of shades. And we tried it on the backgrounds, which was kind of like nice. But I started feeling like it's a little bit, with the gray, it starts to feel a little muddy. It's like, it doesn't, it's a little, it's kind of interesting, but also like it feels not that clean. In some cases like this, for example, I think it works better because it's like mostly the blue tone, but here when the gray and the blue is kind of, or the green is kind of connecting, it doesn't quite work. So we went back to our style, which is like, I don't know, these gradients with rounded corners. And so yeah, this ended up being like maybe the kind of like the last iteration. So for the image, this hero image, I was thinking like this kind of, I don't know, it's there's like different layers to this. So there's like there's this background which is like a grid, which is like then lighten up with the icon itself, and then you have like this kind of layer below it that it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a, I don't know, I was thinking it's kind of like this class surface below it, and then on top of it you actually have the icon, and this class surface is kind of like lighting up and then lighting up everything else. And then there's some kind of, I don't know, maybe this is cut out, or there's a separate lighting here that it's lighting up the actual icon or the logo. And yeah, so most of the text now is like the color is here. So this is kind of like the what is unique about this page kind of. And then we have the sections that are kind of more toned down, has the gradient, screenshot, screenshot. And yeah, this ended up being mostly where we landed. And we had some like additions, like for example, this theme section was something we added like kind of like at the, well, almost like the last minute, because I thought it was like a nice visual to show on this page. And then we added some like additional links as well as like some like testimonials that we collected, or comments we collected from our users. And there was a lot of like, I don't know, if you look at the file, like it's not the messiest I have, but yeah, usually like when I work on something, I keep like kind of pulling things out, because I try to like think like, okay, how do we actually export this? And then I have to like pull it out, and like maybe actually I need to export it in full size, because like the size of this box might be like different on different screens. So then I always think about like how to actually export the assets. And with screenshots, we always export them like kind of like no transparency, no like corners or like rounded corners. We just do the rounding on the website, because like if you have transparency on images, then it adds to the file size. So that's why we, even though like here I have the rounding here, I just like kind of do a separate export that removes that rounding and exports as that's like a square image. I also like to help the engineering to think about the mobile size. So I also like made some kind of like, here's some like examples. I didn't do the whole page in mobile, because I think this is kind of like the rules they should just follow, and I don't have to like do all of it. And like this project was quite quick. I think it took maybe like I don't know, I think about a week, I would say, to design and build. And there was from the beginning. So I think the design took most of the time, but I think the building still took a few days. And we started also wanted to like kind of update the linear method page. So there's like now this like a new graphic and a little bit different layout here. And then we also always wanted to do this kind of article pages that we can talk more deeply about some topics. So here's the design for this, and like here I was like trying different like title sizes, and then like kind of like what the spacing is, and like what are some of the other components we could use. And yeah, we also made some like backgrounds, like this kind of like picture like wavy things with gradients, with some noise, and then also I just tried it just more like a blurred. And sometimes people ask about this, like how you make this kind of like multi-hue gradients in Figma. And the way I do it is like you have some kind of element, then you do like basically like a like angular gradient. I mean, you could use something else, but I guess I always use angular for some reason. It does create these angles here, but it's fine. And you can like keep adding colors, and you kind of like, I think you kind of have to like find like what are the right tones to like go together, like and are like next to each other. Because if it's like weird, if it's too strong or kind of weird, it doesn't like work. but here you can kind of like adjust it, and like you can adjust the sizing or whatever. But yeah, you still have this angle here. So what you can do is do like a layer blur, and then you just like blur it out. The problem here is now it's okay, it's kind of fuzzy and it's not that strong anymore. So what you do is you kind of mask it out, and you make this kind of box. And then what you can do then, now you can copy this layer. So just copy the gradient and then do like a soft light or whatever. You can do hard light too, or you can use different things, or you can layer different things. I think often the simplest thing is just to like overlay it with soft light, and then you can even like kind of adjust it a little bit. Like it doesn't have to like be the same. You can kind of like turn it around and see like, okay, that actually kind of creates interesting like effect, that it's like a little bit like there's like purple here and purple here. So, and then you can just like, I don't know, add your image here, and then you add some like rounding, and that's how it is. What else? Yeah, so on the app icon itself, I had to like to actually implement this. I thought like maybe it's easiest to implement it if I clean up this icon. So there's like the different layers, like here's the mask, and behind this mask there's that kind of angular gradient, which is like the glow layer. And then I have the border, which is just like a white, yeah, no, it's actually the colored border. So I have a couple of the glows there, and then I just have the mask that creates the image. And I thought like maybe it's easiest to implement this with this kind of SVG mask. So I just exported this mask to the site, and then let's see. Then what I tried, oh, that's small, was like my first idea was just like, okay, it's gonna lights up. It's kind of like turning on. It's kind of like a power button or something that kind of like turns on the lights, which is pretty simple. It's like it's just a CSS animation, and these are kind of CSS borders, and the gradient is actually made with CSS, and it kind of like just animates that. But then Tuomas in our team was like, okay, maybe you can work on it, and he came up with this laser animation, which he first said like, is it too much? And then we said like, no, it's not too much. It's like just great. So yeah, it was like kind of like we didn't even plan the animation. It's just gonna happen. So that's kind of like sometimes what we do with this sites is we just like start with something, and then different people in the team kind of collaborate, and then that's like the result. Yeah, and then the last, so what it looks like, you've probably seen it, but now it looks like this. And I think the frame rate is not like, now it was good, but probably it's not great on the Zoom call, but you can see it yourself. And we try to add a video here to make it like, because in this case we wanted to show like how it's kind of like more tactile and stuff. I added some countdown there and some like GIFs going there. But yeah, this is kind of like how it happened. We also did some like other like this kind of, I don't know, abstract posters to be used for the linear method and stuff. So, but that was it. And yeah, I guess like we just added like this box to the homepage too. We didn't want to change the homepage too much at this point. So we added this kind of like banner that kind of like highlights that we did this funding, and then here's kind of like what's new. And yeah, I think the main point here was though like, oh, like linear actually has like this, it's like the next level, it's like a next version. We changed a lot how the app feels and like what you can do with it. We also added the roadmaps, which kind of like expands the use case. And I think the workflow, the views also help with that like you can create more views for your team or for the company to see different kinds of things. And I think just like nice things like emojis are important. And then I guess the big other thing was the OAuth support, that if you're building integrations, it's better experience now. But yeah, that was it. So Erin, what do we have?
Yeah,
Next.
no, thanks so much. So that's great. We actually already have our first question in the chat from Gregory. Gregory Gavorkian, do you want to ask it? And then before anyone, if you have a question, post it in the chat, and then we'll just call in order. We'll get to as many as we can. If we don't get to all of them, we'll try to answer some of them in Slack afterward. But yeah, open for questions, and we'll keep the first 10 or so minutes recorded, and then we'll close off the recording. So if you have any questions you don't really want recorded, you can ask later.
And I think there was some questions here already,
Yeah,
which I didn't see. Sorry, it's like
so
hard to
yeah, Gregory,
focus.
do you want to ask your question?
Oh, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you so much, Karri. It was an awesome presentation and loved the way you thought through it. Just a quick question, because when you were sharing your landing page, some of the things were separated by borders and some of the things were separated by backgrounds, like the gradient backgrounds and everything. And I just wanted to hear, how do you decide between the two? When do you decide to separate sections of information with borders, when with backgrounds, etc.?
Yeah. Maybe I'll share again. Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it's I don't have necessarily like. So did you mean these kind of backgrounds?
I mean these, and generally in the app as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, like, so I think it's on this web page. I think like why I use this kind of background, like alternating backgrounds. I feel like a border, because these sections are so big, like you might not fit it to your screen. The border kind of gets lost very easily. I mean, this is also very like not that contrasted border right now, but I think sometimes like in a website, like borders can be fine, but when you have like kind of large contrasty elements and even like these kind of images, I think the borders can easily get lost. On the apps itself, see if we have like I guess we have a picture here. I think the same rule kind of goes, like in some ways, like we use borders here to kind of like delineate, like, okay, this is like one issue, and you can kind of follow the border to see like what is the attributes of it. And then we use the background shades to kind of create this groupings, because like if you have a long list of things, then it's really easy, like if you scroll fast, it's really easy to miss this kind of section. So that's why it's stronger. And then I think like overall with the let me see. So this was actually like our Series A, like the launch project, which we kind of like started thinking about early, but then didn't like start working on it that's fast. Just gonna switch here. So yeah, I mean, like, so the one thing is like the groupings, I think like needs to be visible, and like if you have like a long list of things. And then I haven't so far, like overall the app is fairly flat. So like, for example, the sidebar or the header is not currently like colored, because I felt that like it's kind of like clashes with this a little bit. So we don't have a solution for that. Here I felt that like it is nice that there's a little bit just like a different layer, even though it's like kind of like the same layer, but it is actually kind of disconnected from this. So I felt that like it is good to kind of like separate it. So this is kind of, but then what I don't like, that if you actually have the sidebar here, it's kind of creates this, you have this, I don't know, you have background here and then no background here, and then you have background here. So I don't enjoy it too much. So yeah, I think it's always like a balance, like where when a border is enough and when you actually want to highlight something with the background. So I don't have like a super hard rule on that. And sometimes I don't use borders at all. because they just add too much. And sometimes you definitely can have too many borders, and then you kind of have to like think like, okay, do I actually need all these borders? I think the borders often just kind of like line up things or break down things. So like here you have the issue detail, and then I just break it down with a line to that like everything under below, it's like about the activity. But I mean, it's a good question, but yeah, I don't know if that was like very consistent answer, but yeah, I think
That's
it's
an
like
awesome
I
answer.
usually try both.
Thank you.
Awesome. Next question's from Ivan about Figma files. Ivan, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yep. Hi.
yes.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing. I think it's lovely and so useful. And my question is about how do you organize your Figma file? I mean, the structure, do you organize by flows or by, I don't know, any other method that you can share with us?
Yeah. I don't know if I recommend this, but the way I've been designing and Adrian too is that we kind of just have this one massive file, which is like linear app 2020. So basically all the projects we work on this year. And we need to do some cleanup here, but and now it's loading. But the idea is here is that like I don't enjoy switching somehow. I don't just enjoy switching the files a lot. So that's why I've been liking to work in pages. So you have like a home page, and then we have this kind of app layout page. And then we have like, okay, this is like in progress. So there's some of the work we working on. Here's like things in review that like are kind of like basically done, but not fully done yet. So here's, for example, we work on the icon. That generally, like at some point I was also using like actually the like linear names for it. So what I would do is like so I go here, and then I might like copy the git branch name, and then I'll just create a new branch, and it's gonna like has my name already in it, and then I would just like start designing here. And then like when I come to this file, I can also immediately see what Adrian is working on. So in that way, it's easier for me to like just go to look rather than like I have to find the file somewhere. The downside is that like these files get pretty big. I do think that like Figma doesn't load the whole file unless you access the page. So I don't think it matters too much, but I think it is because Figma doesn't have any search within the file. It can be challenging sometimes. So usually what I do is then like I copy the page or the link to the page, so you can link to the specific frame or the page, and then I will go to like, I don't know, linear, and then like post it in there. So whenever we have like a design feature, or like when I'm working on the design task, then I can just like tag it on the engineer, and they can like find it that way. Or if we have like a project, like so this is a project, so we might add a link here, and then you can kind of like access it here. So that's kind of like how I structure it. And then there's just like few things like basically I have the system file that I showed, which is kind of like, it's like the library that then all the other files use. And then I have a specific file for the website, because usually it's like we don't often work on the website and the app at the same time. So they're like kind of different worlds. So that's why I have them different. And I think the one main reason why I like this, like having them in a one same file, is that I just feel it's faster. Like, okay, I need this icon, I just go here, and then like I jump back where I was kind of, and I can paste it here, rather than like trying to like navigate both the pages and the file, or the files and the pages. So that's kind of like how I structure it.
That's great, Karri. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. And next question is from Akanksha, and I think Heis will take it, but if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Akanksha. I'm from San Francisco. I was curious to know about the theme customization feature and how the team thought about, letting users customize the look and feel of the application, and if at all there were any concerns about the users taking it too far from the original theme and kind of affecting the overall feel of the tool.
Hi, yeah, great question. So I think that there certainly were some concerns. It started out as a hackathon project. And I think the first iterations also did not have all the customizability that now exists. Like there was some discussion about whether you should be able to customize the sidebar. And the theme that I did most of my testing with I called Barbie Dream House. I'll just briefly share it. I know that it did mostly, it was not. It's very like pink and purple, and so it's definitely a very different vibe. And I know that Karri did not love, that brand, but I think that was sort of the point of themes, that it's like you can make linear feel like your own. And we wanted to give people that chance to sort of express themselves.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and I think that definitely there can be that kind of concern. I think we just felt that like it's worth more to the users to like in this kind of tool that people can feel it's their own rather than us like telling them. But yeah, it might complicate things in the future too. So that's something like we don't know yet.
Thank you.
Great. And then Saad, want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hey, yeah. Thanks for doing this, by the way. I was just wondering, how do you approach your projects, like from the beginning to the end? Like, what's your process? Is it mostly like, I saw you doing some stuff that's like, I guess, experimental, right? Just trying out different things. But I was wondering, do you have any like methodical way about going about things?
Yeah. So generally, like how we operate is like that's why I also built the roadmap feature, is that we have like before every quarter we think about what is the next quarter's roadmap, and like for the company itself we might have certain goals, like we want to like see these kind of things happening, but then it's all often comes down to the actual things we need to fix or things we need to build. So we create that roadmap. So we kind of like do some kind of planning and like as think about like what would be the most impactful things or what are the things we actually really need to do. And like I think there's always in a startup you can do a lot of different things, but you kind of have to ask yourself like, do we have to do this now, and or is this impactful to do now? So then we kind of assign, I can share a little bit like so far we've been using Notion for this, but I think for the next quarter we can move to linear. But so we do some kind of like a list of projects, and we usually just describe them, and then we set a lead or DRI, DRI, like directly responsible individual. But basically it means like that person is the lead of the project. And then we have this like a project brief template, which is like the team and the lead has to think about like, okay, like why are we doing this? Like, what is the, like, so we have the first thing is like kind of write the changelog entry. So just remind yourself like, why are we doing this? Like, how would this like help the user, or like think about the user first. And then we can like, and actually we didn't fill this out that well, I guess, but like we would have like reasoning for it, like some of the problems we're currently facing, what are the goals or outcome we want to see, and then we might have like a random user feedback like from all of you. So we collect this in linear, and we also just search our front, and we often ask questions on the Slack. It's like, hey, anyone have comments on this idea? And then we can like collect it here, and then whenever the team then the team can kind of like share this document with everyone. And I think the main thing why we do these documents is that we could get the sense of the scope. That because like sometimes people are misaligned on that. They're like, yeah, I thought this project will do this and this and this, but actually it's just gonna do this one thing, which is fine. But it's just like people sometimes don't like have different level of expectation. So that's why like we want to do these documents to share that. And then the team starts working on it. They can like decide how they exactly work on it. But obviously we also like mostly like we have the project in linear, and then people work on it. We kind of like on the cycles which prioritize usually the project work. So who usually there's now like two teams. There's like a European team, and then there's the US team working on different projects. And so that's kind of like how we do it. And then we share with the team the feedback or the progress. So we have a call once a week, and then people can share their like kind of what's been like the progress, and then they can get feedback on it. And obviously people can also share it whatever time on Slack and get feedback on it too. So that's like briefly how we do it.
Well, thanks.
Thank you. Next question. Love the linear color. Oh, Darshan, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So, hey Karri, Darshan here from Graph CMS. We're very happy customers of yours. So, I just wanted to ask that what is the process? What does your mood boarding process look like, or where do you go to take inspiration for the overall design, but also especially for colors? Because we find that the colors of linear, they're very contrasting, but also very subtle. And overall, using the app is really a great pleasure.
Yeah, and that's a good question. It's like maybe hard to answer. I mean, I think that I will just share something again. I think on so like initially when I was thinking, like this is some of the mood board for like, I don't know, for our first website. And I think like kind of like the feeling I wanted to bring is more like, I don't know, this futuristic, I don't know, like professional feel. So that's why like we're kind of like dark and things. I think on the colors, so like on the UI colors, that's like, I think mostly I've been just like tweaking them a lot over time. So I think we started with very different shade of gray, but then I think now it's a little bit too shaded, but so I feel like kind of like just tweaking the colors. So I feel like, okay, it's one thing, I don't want to go too dark with this because then you lose, like you cannot really use shadows anymore. So that's why I think like if you make a dark mode app, then it should be like somewhat grayish. The problem with grays is that like, I think, so this gray is like kind of bluish, which I kind of like, but then obviously you can also do like reddish hue. I don't know how well it shows, but it's kind of like, but then it starts to look more like brown. I'm just kind of pushing this to see that. So that's kind of like the challenge with the grays is that like, how do you find the right shade that is not too too colorful? Because then the problem is like, for example, if you run the app in Safari is somewhat, it's not really bluish either. It's like, I think this new version of Safari is different too, but the previous version was more brownish. So I kind of like tried to find a shade that is like kind of like between this. And then I think the purple color just came from, I don't know, I think I like it that it's not exactly blue and it's not exactly purple. And then for the gradients, it's more like I often just kind of click around like what I think like what kind of colors I like or like what works. So a lot of the colors are like just tweaked by like, I just think it looks good and then I choose it. So there isn't like necessarily like a method to it. So it's more like kind of tweaking things.